I'd like to call to order the Milan Area Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you for attending this evening. Thank you for everyone coming out and those watching online. I do want to make note that all board members are present this evening. And if you do want your name to be recorded for the minutes, please remember to sign in at the table at the entrance. First up, I need a motion to thank the administrators of Milan Area Schools as recorded in this resolution. Whereas energetic and inspiring school leadership is essential if Milan schools are to prepare students for success, both during their K through 12 careers and afterward, and whereas school administrators serve as educational visionaries, instructional leaders, assessment experts, disciplinarians, community builders, facility managers, special programs administrators, and guardians of various legal, contractual, and policy mandates and initiatives, they are also entrusted with the educational development of young people. And whereas school administrators set the academic tone for their schools and work collaboratively with teachers and parents to develop and implement a clear mission, high curriculum standards, and performance goals. And whereas school administrators play a vital role in the success of students by creating school environments that facilitate great teaching and learning as well as continuous school improvement. And whereas much of the success of K through 12 students can be attributed to school administrators who act as the liaison between the school and the community it serves, ensuring that parents and taxpayers are aware of student and school achievements. And whereas the celebration of Michigan School Administrators Month would honor elementary, middle level, and high school administrators and recognize the importance of school leadership in ensuring that every child has access to high quality education. And whereas during this month, we join with educators, parents, and students throughout Michigan to raise awareness of the importance of educational leadership, we also recognize and thank the hardworking school administrators in Milan schools who set exemplary examples of service. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Milan Area Schools Board of Education recognizes our administrators' commitment and proudly thanks them in the name of the community and the Milan Area School District. Be it further resolved that the Milan Area Schools Board of Education strongly encourages all members of our community to join with us in personally expressing appreciation to our administrators for their dedication and devotion to their work. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Macchio. Support by Kiger.
It's been moved and supported to thank the administrators of Milan Area Schools as recorded in attachment A. I just want to echo that resolution for our building administrators. We sincerely appreciate all their work. And once we pass this resolution, I would hope that Mr. Gearbaugh would pass this on to those administrators. Other comments? It's been moved and supported to thank the administrators of Milan Area Schools as recorded in attachment A. Ms. Heika.
Macchio?
Yes.
Rosenleacher?
Yes.
Sislo?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
Freight?
Yes.
Heika, yes. Kiger?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comments. Just a reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you'll be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning, and I'll ask you to finish your thought when the timer goes off. Board members may question speakers, but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who would like to address the board? Any other members of the public who would like to address the board?
Good evening, Rachel Hobbs. As many of you are aware, I have been requesting that the expenses be part of the board packet or be available to the public. I haven't gotten anywhere with that, and I've been requesting repeatedly. Finally, at one of the summer board meetings, Mr. Sislo advised me that I should email Mr. Gearbaugh and request those meetings, or request those reports. Mr. Gearbaugh and I had a sidebar conversation afterwards, and he said he would provide them to me. He didn't. So I submitted a FOIA request for a 6-month subscription of them. And I received the first disclosure last month before the meeting at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or in the evening, however you want to consider it. For this month, I went round and round with Brian. I asked Brian if he could give me them a little bit more in advance, that I was well aware of what the statute said. And he created his own laws. He went above the legislature and did whatever he wanted, and CC'd you, Mr. Sislo. He believes that he can be reasonable in his disclosure, even though these are public documents, and provided them to me today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know how anybody who is doing any sort of due diligence can review those expense reports in 3 hours when they're working or whatever. I am well aware that you receive those financials and reports on the Friday before the board meeting. I am perfectly fine with receiving them then. You should allow people the consideration and due diligence to be able to look into those reports. You guys have received millions of dollars in the last couple of years, and we're not seeing anything that's going on. We should be able to see how those funds are being spent.
30 seconds.
The Freedom of Information Law is a pro-disclosure law that requires public bodies to provide access to or copies of public records unless records fall into one or more exemptions as provided in the statute. That is spoken by the courts. The statute itself is very clear that it is a public policy of the state that all persons are entitled to full and complete information regarding the affairs of government and official acts who represent them as public officials and public employees that consist within this act. These people should also be informed that they may fully participate in the democratic process. I'm sure that next month we'll be a little bit more compliant with the disclosure of these because we don't have any compliance issues, do we? One other thing that I would like to bring up is that the College Info Night is next Thursday.
30 seconds.
I appreciate the guidance office putting that on. However, that conflicts with conferences. I've also corresponded with the guidance office, and I've asked them if, since this is a big important deal for juniors and seniors, if they would be willing to host it a second time. I was provided a slideshow. I feel that it is extremely important to our juniors and our seniors to prepare them for college, and I would respectfully request that you all see the value in it and have that program at least another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hobbs.
I don't normally do this, but I am going to respond to this public comment. When I spoke with Mrs. Hobbs, I told her that I would provide her the reports if she emailed me, and every time she emailed me, I provided the reports. So it's an absolute lie that I did not provide the reports when she asked for them. As far as FOIA goes, I did not create any additional laws. I have 5 days from the date of creation of the report to get them to a person under FOIA law. I have verified that with our legal counsel. Thank you.
Lisa Sanders. I wasn't actually planning to speak, but I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention that October is Dyslexia Awareness Month. So I know the school's been on this whole inclusion bandwagon, and just for future, I would love to see all the Milan schools have some sort of, acknowledgement to this, whether it's things in the hall or things in the classroom in general, because even people who don't have dyslexia or a learning disability can benefit from knowing or learning about them. So I just thought that would be a good positive thing to mention, and maybe in the future there's a committee, or maybe Lon Smith will take it under his wing and help have TCs put something together. I don't know, but I thought it was important to bring to everyone's attention. And then also recent chatter, amongst the community on the True Friends of Milan page specifically, but I'm sure it's other places, is the need for power time. And I know that kind of had to get altered and took away because of COVID and kids being behind, to really try to get the kids caught up from like an agenda standpoint. But I'm just curious, and I don't obviously expect a response, but I wanted to mention it. Kids with and without IEPs are struggling without that true power time that they used to have. So I am curious if the plans for that to return are going to be in the near future, or if that will be no more. And if there's no true plans at this time, I just want you guys to be aware that you can plug into community outlets and see the cry for help, specifically even posted just today, but there's been other communications prior. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders, and thank you for your continued attention to dyslexia. We do appreciate it. Are there others? All right, thank you for those comments. Next up is routine matters for approval. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of September 28th, 2022.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Kiger.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of September 28th, 2022. Questions or concerns? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of September 28th, 2022. Ms. Heika?
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes.
Heika, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Macchio,
Yes.
motion carries 7-0.
Next up, I need a motion to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses.
Moved by
By
Heika.
Kiger.
I have moved by Heika,
Support by Kiger.
support by Kiger. It's been moved and supported to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses. Any issues, concerns? It's been moved and supported to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses. Ms. Heika?
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes.
Heika, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Macchio,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
motion carries 7-0.
Next up, I need a motion to approve the 2023 resolution to levy summer taxes as included in attachment B.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Macchio.
It's been moved and supported to approve the 2023 resolution to levy summer taxes as included in attachment B. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just quickly, this is not a new resolution. This is something that we have done for years in the district. In the jurisdictions that do summer taxes, we ask them to collect 50% of the school tax in the summer and 50% in the winter. So this is just a continuation. There's no change in the way that anyone in the district would be handled.
Any questions or concerns? It's been moved and supported to approve the 2023 resolution to levy summer taxes as included in attachment B. Ms. Heika?
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes.
Heika, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Macchio,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next up, in our strategic goal of finance and operations, we are going to have a first reading of the 2022 annual audit. We do have a guest with us this evening, Mr. Daniel Clark, who is a principal with Raymond, our auditor. So, Mr. Clark, welcome.
Thank you. So before you, I would have passed out a presentation, which should have been the top copy, and then you have a copy of the financial statements for fiscal year 22, as well as the board communication letter. But the presentation on top is a summary of both of those documents, so I'm going to go through that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions in the other two documents. So if you want to move to slide 2, just a couple of things I'm going to go over tonight. Just going to have a quick introduction of the team members that run the team. There are required annual board communications, and then talk about the financial results of the district, and then some upcoming accounting pronouncements, and then can open it up for any questions, but feel free as I go through this to ask them as they come up. Sometimes it's just easier to do that. So slide 3 here, it just has the team members. My name is Daniel Clark, I'm the signing principal. Tracy Kendall was, again, the senior manager this year. And then we also had Dan Merritt as a secondary senior manager, and then Brendan Burns was the staff on your engagement this year.
So, Mr. Clark, have you ever done an audit for Milan Schools?
No, this is my first year. So we did rotate partners this year. So it has been with a different partner out of a different office.
Okay, thank you.
But yes, this is my first year as your signing principal.
Thank you.
Slide 4 here are the required board communications. Number 1 and foremost is that we did issue an unmodified or a clean opinion on your 6/30/2022 financial statement. So that's the highest level of assurance that we can provide as your auditors. Number 2, we are also asked to communicate any new accounting pronouncements that were issued during the year. GASB 87, which GASB is the Government Accounting Standards Board, and that's the rules in which we follow. They did have leases. That new standard was issued this year. There was no significant or material impact on the district, but that was implemented and evaluated, and there were no changes that were needed in the way the financial statements were presented. We are asked to communicate that we did assess and deem management estimates, including depreciation expense, accrued compensated absences, your insurance liability, and then we also review your pension and your other post-employment benefit, and we assess those and deem those all to be reasonable. We are happy to say in number 4 that we encounter no difficulties while performing your audit. We appreciate Krista and all of her help to get this ready. And as noted in number 5 and 6, it is evident that there were no material adjustments that were needed, nor uncorrected immaterial adjustments that were needed, and furthermore, we had no material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or even any other matters that were noted. So a very clean audit, the cleanest audit that a district can get. So moving on to the financial statement section, slide number 5. This is entity-wise, so this is all funds combined. Foremost, obviously, the general fund and all your other special revenue funds, capital projects funds, and debt service fund. But at the end of the year, you had $90.5 million in assets compared to $100.2 million last year. So your assets actually went down about $9.7 million from this year to last year. A big cause of that is your cash and cash equivalents went down about $2.8 million. That mostly related to a negative net change in your net position of $1.3 million at the entity-wide level. You'll also see that your net capital assets went down about $2.4 million. So you had only about $144,000 in current year capital additions, and your depreciation expense was $2.6 million. So net, those together was a net decrease of 2.4, which were the significant driving factors of the decrease in your assets this year. Moving to slide 6, so this is your liabilities. The district had $154 million in liabilities this year compared to $167 last year. So your liabilities also decreased about $13.5 million. Most of this is a result of, so last year you did have a state aid note payable of about $1.2 million, which was paid off. and there was no new note issued. And then also your long-term debt continued to decrease about 4.2 million or 4.3 as you pay those annual debt payments, and there was no new significant debt issued during the year. You'll also see your net pension liability went down significantly from 51 million to 34 million, so a decrease of about $16.5 million. Most of that was driven by the investment returns this year, so a significant decrease in both the net pension liability and the net OPEB, or that other post-employment benefit liability, went down about $5.8 million. Again, most of those were driven by investment returns. We've seen this at many other schools that we are doing. Obviously, this is a trend with the market the way it did last year and the year before. We would expect, however, this to kind of go the other way with the market conditions as they've been thus far this year. So good news for this report, but you'll probably see this going back up at least a little bit on your next year's report. Going to slide 7, so your assets minus your liabilities is your net position or your equity, and it's made up of 3 different buckets. The largest portion of this is your unrestricted negative balance of $82.7 million, and I'll speak to that in a moment. That's primarily related to the net pension and the net OPEB liability that are on your books. You did have about $18.9 million in net investment in capital assets, so that would be all things building, your vehicles, land, infrastructure, et cetera. And then you had a small chunk, about 1% or $406,000 in restricted dollars. So those are monies that you had at the end of the year to be spent on specific purposes that have yet to be spent on those purposes. So slide 8 and 9 here just show those 3 different buckets over the last 4 years to just show you a trend analysis here. That top line is that net investment in capital assets that continues to increase year over year as the district continues to add net assets, or I'm sorry, net capital assets, as well as when you pay down that debt as well. And then that bottom line there is those restricted dollars that has remained relatively small over the years. For 2022, you had about $405,000 in restricted. Again, not very much change over the last 4 years. And then slide 9 is that unrestricted balance. So you'll see the 2 different lines there. One is if you take the effect of pension and OPEB out, is that top line. So a much improved picture. That bottom line is the actual net investment, or I'm sorry, the net position negative at the end of the year of $82.6 million. Going to slide 10 and 11, so this is a graph of your net pension liability and your net OPEB liability. So as I already mentioned, in 2022, your net pension liability dropped to about $34.8 million. Your annual required contribution for 2022 was just over $5 million, and you are currently at 73% funded. That is a significant increase over last year of 60%. Again, mostly a result of the investment returns this year, about $11.2 million. And then slide 11, same information, but just the OPEB. So your net OPEB liability went down to $2.2 million. You had required, actuarially required contributions of $964,000 in 2022, and you were 87% funded for 2020, an increase over last year of 59%. So a significant improvement on your funding status for both plans. And then slide 12, we talk a little bit about the revenue and expenses of the district. So in 2022, you had $36.4 million in revenue and $32.7 in expenses. So you had a net positive of about $3.7 million. Most of that net income there at the ND-wide level is related to those pension and OPEB investment increases. And then slide 13 just speaks a little bit to your major revenue line items. So that top line is your state or your largest funding source. That has remained relatively consistent, although a little bit down this year. You were at just over $19 million in state revenue. That middle line is your local revenue, so property taxes mostly, and that stands at $14.3 million. That is an increase over last year of about 13.1. And then that bottom line is your federal money. So you do receive significant federal dollars, and you had about $3 million in federal dollars that you received in 2022. That relates to your children a food cluster, and I know you received a large amount of ESSER money, and that was an increase over last year of about $2.4 million. And then I'll just speak briefly to your general fund specifically on slide 14. In 2022, you had $28.3 million in revenue in general fund. You had $29.3 in expenses, so you actually had a net loss, and I think I spoke to this at the beginning, in your general fund of about $992,000. Last year, you did have a surplus of 1.3, and you'll look back in 2020, you had a loss, but in 2019, you had a gain. So actually, over the last 4 years, the net, if you add all 4 of those years together, is practically a net zero. And then slide 15 is the last financial slide here. We always like to talk about your coverage ratio in your general fund, so how many months of expenditures are sitting in your fund balance, or what percentage of a year's expenditures are sitting there. So in 2022, you had about 1.5 or 1.5 months sitting in fund balance, or about 13.25%. That is a decrease from 2021, which you had about 2 1/3 months, or 19.5% in fund balance. And then the last slide is just some upcoming accounting pronouncements. There are 6 here that are upcoming over the next 3 years. There are 4 that are potentially going to be implemented next year. However, none of these, from our standpoint at this point, have any kind of financial impact on you guys. As I've put there at the end of each one of those, I have NA. Based on what we know now, there shouldn't be any material effect on the way you record something or the way it's presented in your financials. So with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions or concerns?
I just had one question for you.
Sure.
So on page 80, it references federal grants. No material weaknesses identified, no significant deficiencies identified or reported, no audit findings disclosed that are required to be reported in accordance with 2 CFR 200.516A.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if you could tell me what that means.
So, yes, the CFR stands for Code of Federal Regulations. So when you do receive federal dollars, you are required to follow what's called the Uniform Grant Guidance. So that is how we test your grants to make sure they're in compliance with the federal government and their standards. So the CFR stands for those codes in which we have to follow to test, and the grant or the codification that this school district has to follow. So we're here to make sure that you're actually following those rules. There's different subparts to that. The one that you referenced specifically is the one that talks about the findings and what findings would relate to if we did find them. Things that we test are making sure that the money is being spent on the allowable cost or the allowable purpose, making sure it's spent in the required time frame. I think there are 13 different attributes that we have to test. Some are applicable, some are not, depending on what federal program we're talking about. Like for the nutrition cluster, there's eligibility requirements sometimes, so then we would have to test that as well. So what that is saying is that we tested all those based on the programs we tested, and we did not find any altercation or deviations from those standards. So.
And I have another question for you, sorry.
Sure.
So with regard to the Government Accounting Standard Board regulations that were identified for management, there are just 4 that the district needs to be concerned about?
Yeah, the ones that I listed are upcoming. Again, really nothing to be concerned about necessarily. It's more, hey, these are applicable for this fiscal year in which I note. So fiscal year 23, there are 4. None of them relate to anything that you currently are participating in, et cetera. So I would say, yeah, obviously as these come applicable, we'll talk to the district, talk to Chris to make sure that we're on the same page and that there's nothing that needs to be discussed or investigated.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question. I'm looking at the letter,
Yes.
the accompanying letter, and I'm on page 2. And there are significant risks identified. And it says, we've identified the risks of management override of internal control and revenue recognition as significant risks and have obtained an understanding of the district's related controls. Can you explain to me what that is?
Yeah, so typically one of the risks that we always identify at pretty much any institution, especially schools, obviously the revenue cycle is one of your main cycles. So obviously the school district receives many different types of revenue. So when we are doing our risk assessment, we have to know what things are the major risks, and one of which is revenue recognition, making sure that you're receiving it properly, recognizing it properly, and it's being presented properly on your financial statement. So that's always going to be a risk in any audit, because revenue is obviously the main source of income of any organization. So that's just pointing out that we did identify that as a significant risk, obviously test it. We do some walkthroughs to make sure that the different cycles are happening appropriately, and we did not note any deviations to the revenue recognition.
I have another question, but it's really more for Krista. I had a question about, on page 33 and also page 22, under other funding sources, it says transfers in, and I just want to confirm that this represents a $40,000 transfer from the food service fund to the general fund.
Yes, it does. The district is allowed to transfer funds from food service to cover expenses that are not direct to the program, up to a certain percentage. I do a calculation every year to determine if we have the money to transfer into the general fund. It's covering the utilities and the custodian and the payroll time. In other grants, it would be referred to as indirect. In this case, we transferred $40,000, which was below the amount that I could have transferred.
Thank you.
And as she noted too, the food service balance has a $352,000 fund balance at the end of the year. That's on page 59. So obviously, that would always need to stay positive. So as Krista stated, the $40,000 was appropriate.
Other questions or concerns?
I just have a quick request, because this is a lot to take in, but could we, for the next board meeting, get our typical report of where we were and what we budgeted for, and then where we ended, that's in the same format that we usually have, that way
What
that'll
you're
just...
used to seeing?
Yes, please. Yes, thank you.
And also on page 22, there's a budget to actual as well. I don't know how that's presented typically to you, but there's also a budget to actual schedule in the financial statements on page 22 that can show you the different line items of what was budgeted and what was...
Found it, Krista. I didn't see that on that page. Thank you.
So obviously, yes, it is a lot of information to take in. So this is why we do a first reading. This gives us the opportunity to look over this. And if we have any questions, obviously ask Mr. Gerbaugh, who can pass them on to Krista or to Mr. Clark in order to get an answer prior to our approval at our next board meeting, so that this can be submitted via the deadlines from the state.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
So Krista, if I'm looking at page 22, does this tell me that we ended the year almost $1 million better than we had budgeted?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
But it also tells you we still ended the year using part of our fund balance.
No, I
We're
see
still
that.
using $1 million in fund balance.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Clark. Drive
All
home
right, thank you.
safely. All right, next up in our agenda, in regards to our strategic goal for personnel and leadership, I need a motion to appoint the following people to the teaching positions listed at the base salaries listed effective for the 2022-2023 school year. Nancy Teetons, Paddock Library, Alice Brofst Walsh, Simons Library, and Lisa Griffith, Young 5 Specials.
Moved by Pharaoh.
Support by Rosenleacher.
It's been moved and supported to appoint the following people to the teaching positions listed and the base salaries listed effective for the 2022-23 school year. Mr. Gearbaugh.
These are all part-time hires to help assist with the elementary specials classes. These are one-year positions. We hired some retired staff to come back and help us out for this 1 year, and all 3 of the employees know that this is a one-year job.
Any questions or concerns?
Mr. Sissel?
Sure, that's right.
So we are hiring these individuals to be in compliance with the contract, correct, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Not exactly. We were in compliance with the contract, but there were some concerns with class sizes, even though they were within the contract language.
So this just assures that we're following everything correctly?
We were in line with the contract with the way we ran it last year. This is adding a little extra support as we had done in other areas.
Just for this year?
Just for this year, yes.
So are these salaries going to be retroactive back to when they started?
They've been paid as substitutes, and so we will calculate, this salary is for the entire year, so we'll subtract what we've paid them already, and then they'll be contracted for the remaining amount.
Okay, and then in the case with Mrs. Teetons, are we going back an additional year? Because per her resume that you submitted to us, she was the special teacher for Young Fives last year as well. Was she?
No, we treated that using a different language in the contract. When the hours got expanded, then we had to go to different language in the teacher contract.
So
it's only for this school year. She was compensated according to the contract last year.
And Brian, my understanding is that by hiring these individuals will lessen the number of students that are in each special and then give kids dedicated library time. Is that right?
Correct. The other thing it does is instead of trying to take 6 fourth grade classes and smush them into 5 specials, it now allows those 6 to go to specials, so one teacher doesn't have to split their classroom up. And it does provide dedicated library time, yes.
Mr. Gearbaugh, are there any other situations where we feel like we have a situation like this where we have to come up with a fix and
No.
so all the other positions and staff and such are fixed so that we don't have an issue with like the staff or the specials or TCs or
No, everything
paras?
else has been taken care of.
Any other questions or concerns? All right, it's been moved and supported to appoint the following people to the teaching positions listed and base salaries listed effective for the 2022-23 school year. Nancy Teetons for Paddock Library, Alice Brofst Walsh for Simons Library, and Lisa Griffith for the Young 5 Specials. Ms. Heike.
Freight,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Macchio,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, next up on the agenda in regards to our strategic objective for communications and community engagement, we are going to consider the recommendations from the Communications Committee. Again, Ms. Tousley presented an outline of this to us at the last board meeting, and it's now here for our consideration. I'm thinking we'll kind of also treat this as a first reading of this. Ms. Freight, Ms. Rosenleacher, myself, we can answer questions in regards to it that you may have. My thoughts would be then at our next meeting, we would have some type of chart that would outline what the recommendations are and what we would consider the disposition as far as, are we going to implement that recommendation? Is it something that we need more information from the committee, or is it something that perhaps gets referred to the district communication team that's going to be formed out of that committee? So those are my thoughts with that. So like Ms. Tousley outlined at our last meeting, there are really 4 recommendations. The fourth one being that this communications committee continue, and we have outlined that we do desire to continue this committee. As I've spoke about previously, when we do look at redesigning our committee structure and having a committee that's in support of each of the strategic goal areas. Obviously, communications is a strategic goal, and we will be continuing that committee. The other three areas of recommendations were really around the two-way communication in regards to the Big Red Board chats, and then the other was the two-way communication communication in regards to board information on the website, and then the other area of recommendations was a kind of a web-based publication, social media presence for the board in regards to things that could be published in regards to the board business, and even getting into some district business. So that's where, forming the district committee would be helpful in those regards. So from there, I guess what I'll do is we'll open it up for discussion. If Ms. Freight or Ms. Rosenleacher have any other comments to add, we can go from there.
Go ahead.
I have a quick question. On the Big Red chats, did the committee discuss how many they would like per year?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of there was a discussion about that. There wasn't. There was some discussion that there'd be one every month, but then the discussion started to go around. Well, maybe there's a instead of it being a Big Red Board chat, that it be a Big Red chat, and then it be hosted by a certain group. So the idea would be it's a Big Red chat hosted by the Board of Education. Then perhaps maybe there's a Big Red chat hosted by Superintendent Gearbaugh. There's a Big Red chat hosted by the high school principal. So that was kind of the thoughts in regards to that, Ms. Freight.
I think there's also discussion that, Mr. Gearbaugh used to have the chats or the, soup from the scoop at the meetings in person, that with the effort of moving this forward to a district communication, and then this being a board communication, that you would maybe continue or bring those back up again now that, everything proceeds that we can do it, so that you do that. And then, like Andrew said, perhaps we have the Big Red Board chat, and it's not always the Board of Education, but you can get communication, Mr. Farrell, from like the high school or the middle school. And because there was some concern if we meet at the high school, is it only high school issues? So there was some thought about having clarity that it was district-wide issues. And so that maybe you could have other administrators there to help provide clarity on that as well. Again, just a recommendation. But moving forward with the hope with the district communication that Mr. Gearbaugh redo is, I don't remember what you call them. You had a catchy saying too, but basically meet with Brian.
Right.
So, but then out of that, the main idea was that at least the Board of Education host one of those at least quarterly. Yeah. So, and I should state that when we divided up, the committee divided up into subcommittees, and it is appropriate for Ms. Freight to speak in regards to that, because she was the board member for the Big Red Chats. I was the board member for the website, and Ms. Rosenleacher was the board member for the media. So.
To continue on that, if you don't mind, Mr. Farrow, I think the forum in which we had, where you and Mrs. Kiger attended before, to keep it open to not just a specific topic and then allow for different questions, was also something very welcomed and something very praised. The board received a lot of kudos on that, and being able to just have a question asked, more like a town hall, if you will. So, and I know that in particular, the one that I was able to attend was very receptive, and I think it was well received by the community, and just helped but kind of bridge some gaps there, and provide some open and transparency for everybody. Because it's difficult. I think one of the things we learned from this committee is it's difficult to explain the board's roles and superintendent's roles and everybody's roles when you have different expectations and you're coming from different avenues. You know, we know what we're supposed to do, we've trained, we've done this, but the community doesn't always know. And one of the things COVID shed a light on is how much they do or do not know, or misconceptions of different things. And so now there's some more involvement and some more questions, and the open forum of it being able to ask the questions helps tremendously to clarify to everyone and provide that support when Mr. Gable has his meetings, when we have ours. That helps tremendously. So the overall issue was to have one quarterly hosted by the board, and then perhaps they move locations. I think we talked about having them only in the cafeteria, but it was very well received. I think they've become better attended. I know that's been a problem in the past. And I think Mr. Sislo will talk about how the thought was to just kind of overall reach everything we could possibly do with getting the information out, not just put it on the website, and do everything we can to make sure, might be reiterating things, but again, to make sure there's complete ways of communication to say this is going down. Because some people check emails, some people don't, some people don't, you know, just to make sure we cover all our bases. To invite as many people as we can in to make sure that that clarity and transparency is received.
Which was evident at the Big Red Chat that we had at just before the last meeting. We asked the audience members how they heard about it, and there was various ways that they heard about the Big Red Chat, as far as from the website, being shared from somebody else, from Facebook. So it was received or seen in the community in various ways.
We could potentially include these Big Red Chats, like the date, times, locations, on like the school calendar, correct?
That was the hope. And one of the things I think, Mr. Sislo, you on the website one was that, hey, once that these dates, you know, if we do agree as a board to have them quarterly, that we kind of set them, and then they are on all of the calendars, everything gets adjoined, it's all on the website, everything is out there. Mr. Gearbach can do the robocall and say, okay, please feel free to join, you know, kind of like the board meeting schedule. You know, if the board does move forward with that recommendation to say, hey, we'll do these quarterly, hosted by the Board of Education, here's where and when.
Thank you.
Kind of write it a little bit more in stone, so.
I guess I have a question about the website improvements.
Sure.
Who's in charge of that?
Who's in charge of that committee? Who's in charge of what? I'm sorry.
Who's in charge of our online presence?
Currently, Mr. Gearbaugh is in charge of the online presence.
And because these are all great suggestions. These are all things that the board has discussed in the past. And as far as I know, our staff employees don't actually have time to add this to their resumes. I think that one of the suggestions that I know I have brought up is a part-time communication person when the district said they wanted to make communication a priority. So I think it's the great suggestions, but if we're going to follow through on them, somebody with the time available needs to be in charge of this.
So yeah, I mean, that can be part of the, when we have the further discussion about that. I mean, that's definitely noted. Even, I mean, that would go, I believe that would go along with the third area of recommendation in regards to the social media presence as well. So.
Yes, Jan, I agree with you, and I have been very vocal about being very careful about how many more people we hire. But I think these are all great recommendations. I do, as you, Jan, worry about who is going to have the time and the expertise to put all this together. And so I agree that I think that the best way for us to do this is to hire someone, whether part-time or full-time. I don't know if this is a full-time job or not, but to be able to fix the website in the ways that are suggested, be able to continually push more content out, because I'm just a little leery of asking more of our teachers and administrators right now in terms of pushing out this kind of content. Or quite frankly, since these were supposed to be recommendations on how the board communicated with the community, I know I don't have the expertise to fix the website. And I don't know if any of my fellow board members do, but that may be an area that we need some help on.
I'd also like to just say, that was part of what we talked about a great deal, especially when you talk about the social media and website pieces of that, was the separation between board communication and district communication, and where that comes from, with the recognition of everything both you, Ms. Heika, and Ms. Kiger have brought up, right? This is to put it on another administrator or our teachers. It becomes very difficult, and it can be a pretty full-time position. So that was something that the entire committee spoke a great deal about.
And just to be clear, there were a couple of, not just throwing out the problem, but resolutions in that there was suggested that how we used to have internships in the wing, that perhaps we take some of our, like we use the theater staff in our meetings now, that perhaps we have, and I think it kind of goes with the grow your own, but in a different area, some tech-savvy kids work along with obvious adult supervision and not have complete, power over the website and stuff, but perhaps have them help with the pictures and some formatting things. And so you have an interested student and maybe an internship type of situation where they could come in and help on that as well. And it was an area of discussion. I know that Mrs. Rosenleacher and Mr. Sislo both got it, that hiring someone is definitely going to have to potentially happen if, like Mrs. Heika said, if we do follow the recommendations. Because it's a very big task, but it's also one that the board has put some serious consideration and wants to move forward with. So not unthought of and not unwarranted. Very serious concerns.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. I agree that it's probably a great way to get some of our students involved. But what I don't want, or what I'm concerned about, is that if we get the students involved, there's still going to have to be an administrator or a teacher who's going to have to oversee it. And so I don't want to place that burden on a teacher and administrator. So I think that even if we hire someone to help manage this, we can still get the students involved. It's just a matter of who's going to manage it from the top.
Somebody has to be responsible and accountable. So, to make things uncomfortable, I don't know if you remember several years ago when a communication committee was discussed, was at a meeting where we were asked to bring recommendations on how to better communication in the district. I think my recommendation was we hire a communication person. But when the communication committee was brought up, I voiced my concerns that if the district was going to divert time and resources, that it not be in general communication, it should be targeted to some of our subgroups so that we could better meet the needs and serve those groups that have been identified in some of the data of test scores. And so I will once again voice an objection to this committee being a longstanding committee. My personal feelings are that committees are best when they're narrow in focus and have specific goals. So if, as a board, we decide that there's a specific communication goal that we want the committee to tackle, I would get on board with that. But just to meet, to discuss communication in general, I think there's too much of a leeway for it to divert into tangents and not be effective or efficient.
I had a question about the communications committee.
Yeah.
Would those committee members change?
Yeah, so the thought was, again, with the ad hoc committee that was formed, the charter for the ad hoc committee was to provide these recommendations. So the ad hoc committee has completed their work by submitting these recommendations. The thought was, again, to help, once with these recommendations, you know, some back and forth with the committee as far as what some of the things that we're talking about now, and how well they're implemented and other issues as we go forward. So, and then, so again, out of that the work of the ad hoc committee is complete. That is correct. So there was an ask of those committee members if they wanted to continue to stay on for a communications committee. So that goes to the point what Ms. Kiger is bringing up. So if we restructure the committee structure like we talked about, I mean, that was where there was a proposal to have a communications committee. But then out of this, also because of the concerns that have just been raised as far as the fine line of understanding between board communications and district communications, there was an idea that a district communications committee be fielded in regards to the strategic goal of, you know, communication with community stakeholders. So there's people that were identified out of this committee that would like to participate in a committee such as that. So it's something that that has been in the past. We had a group that was called Key Communicators shortly before I came on the board, and just when I came on the board, where there was a group that was called Key Communicators who met with Mr. Gearbaugh in regards to you know, issues within the district, things that were coming up on the horizon. That he held meetings with those key communicators, and then the idea was that they would help to disperse that information around the committee. Obviously, that was before. I mean, Facebook was probably around, but there's before the advent of the true acceptance of social media, I guess I would say.
That's how long we've been on the board.
Yeah, it makes, now I'm really old.
Can I add a comment?
Sure.
I like the idea of working through, and some of it would be with me and some of it would be with our tech director, kind of looking at those recommendations, because I think there are some of them that can very easily be done in a couple of hours, and then some of them are a little bit longer task. And so I like the idea that you initially opened with, that we kind of create a document that says, look, and like I said, you might need to talk with Gina Matley, our tech director, on some of them, talk with me on some of them, but we can kind of say, you know, these are the ones that within a very reasonable amount of time we can get corrected, like moving where the board is on the website and some of those things. That's really not that time consuming. The ongoing piece is where I think we look at how we best handle that. So I like your suggestion of kind of putting this into a document that says, what can we do now, what's going to take a little bit longer, and then what's a long-term or ongoing goal.
Brian, I'm sorry, Mr. Gearbaugh, do we know of, I assume there are other districts in our area that have communications directors? Are you aware of any?
I would have to check in the county. I know of at least 2 in the county that have communications directors. I'm not sure beyond that.
Could you reach out to
Yes.
them before our next meeting, just to see? I'm just kind of wondering how much is
Full-time,
that cost?
part-time, kind of base salary, that type
Yes.
of stuff.
Yeah.
And I will try to keep that to districts similar to our size, because I can tell you some of the larger districts, it's actually an assistant superintendent of communications, and obviously that would not be appropriate for us.
We know how much I love hiring new administrators.
So when I do that comparison, I think a lot of districts our size, it's more along like a tech department type salary, someone that can do all of the technical piece of it, but also has the English background to be able to write well. But I will look into that. But like I said, I will try to keep it to districts that are similar in size to us, because that's what's going to make more sense for us.
Thank you.
Yep.
So just as a little example of that, so the district where I teach is about the size of Milan, and we hired a company called K-12 Social Media or something like that. And one of the things that they do for us is they don't really post things like specific updates from superintendents or that type of thing, but they do put a lot of stuff out on our social media, that are just, pictures of projects going on, cool stuff. It's a lot of, positive promotions of things that parents might not know are going on in other buildings. So there's lots of pictures of kids and staff, doing things together, and they kind of put that out there for the last contract that I saw for a nominal fee. Now, like I said, they don't cover any heavier content than that. But the way that we handled it was we have a point person in each building. So one of our first grade teachers volunteered to do that, and he just sends an email out to us every so often and says, hey, if you have anything, any pictures or updates on projects, they're going on that you did in your classroom, and you have photo releases for those kids, then, send it to me and I'll send it along to this group. So it's just to handle everything that we're talking about here, but it is nice to have the consistency, I think, of the same, group posting those things, so you just see, regardless of where, stories are coming from different buildings, it's very consistent across all of our social media. So, yeah, it doesn't handle all of this, but it is, I as somebody who works just in one building, I even like seeing things that are going on in the other buildings that I might not even know about. But it would be a lot for a staff person to take on, but not so much for somebody who volunteers to say, yeah, I'll throw some things their way and, just put a little blurb with it. It's nothing lengthy at all. So just something else to consider. But I like all of the suggestions so far, but I agree. Any heavier content, we have to be careful about wording and careful about things that we say. And so for me, consistency is key, and really somebody with a background in social media and communication who knows what they are doing.
Mrs. Macchio, I believe Mrs. Tuesley will help me with this, but one of the things that came up in the meeting was the consistency and the thought that instead of having to have each building redo what they did, that one of the things you have is like a main area that has those links to all of them. Because one of the things we discovered, Mr. Sislo did it during the meeting, is, put up one, like the Twitter feed, and there were like how many big reds, right? And so you have the official one from the school, and you have the, all of the building links. So not having to repeat posting of the pictures and worried about the permission to get the pictures and things, but that you have the same information, say, at the middle school, but now it's also here so that there's consistency, like within the calendars as well, of here's everything, so that if you have kids at both buildings, both calendars are updated, you know where to get your newsletters, but you're not redoing it, so you as teacher aren't redoing newsletter for this website and your website. There's a link that says, go to Mrs. Macchio,
Right.
But one place to get all of that information that is completely consistent with everyone else, because that was indeed an area of concern. And again, with social media, who's saying what, who's able to post, all the work involved, to have, I think that which was behind the point of Mr. Gearbaugh's key communicators, official, very with the wording and respect to everything that needs to be put out there, and a key area to find all of that is exactly consistent. And again, kind of hold that whole chart of organization together and get that knowledge out that this is where you need to go to do all of these different things. Again, the consistency.
Yeah, I think it's great when, we've talked a lot in the past about transitions from building to building, and to me, this is a perfect example of why we would want that consistency, for parents to have platforms that they're very comfortable using, that kids are comfortable using even too, so, yeah, totally agree with that.
Other questions or comments? So I think what I'm hearing is I'll give some initial feedback to the committee in regards to what we talked about, but I will form a chart for us to kind of look at our next meeting in regards to these recommendations and going forward how they can be handled. So, makes sense?
Sounds
All right,
good.
thank you
Yep.
very much. That feedback is helpful. All right, Next on the agenda is public comment. Just a reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. It's not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you'll be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak up to 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second warning and ask you to finish your thought when the timer goes off. Board members may question speakers, but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who would like to address the board? Are there any public members who would like to address the board?
Lisa Sanders again. I just want to note that I really appreciate you guys taking the time to really think through and talk about those communications. I did not get to make it to the Big Red Chat, and so I'm glad to hear it's still being talked about and discussed. As a parent I had 4 kids in the district at one time in all 4 buildings. It was super hard to juggle. Clearly, the webpage isn't great, but it's not terrible. But my suggestion, and something I've thought over years, is like having an app that would highlight things that parents would access pretty frequently. I mean, that's kind of the way of the future nowadays anyways. So that would help get everyone into one place. And if you are looking at talking to someone with helping with the webpage, I think it's something just to think about. Because my stepbrother is pretty tech savvy and has made apps himself. So it is doable at a probably lower price, especially if you were to find someone doing like an internship or something like that for volunteer work or a project where there could be an app downloadable for people in Milan, and then that would be a good place to start. So I just wanted to mention that as well, but I'm very excited to hear you guys talking about it, but we've been talking about it for a while. So I'm excited to see some action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Yeah, an app was not even mentioned when we just discussed it. So
Not at all.
I think there's other districts who do have apps, but I'm not quite sure on which ones, but I've heard of that.
yeah,
It's kind of like a quick link to pull up the internet. You know what I mean? Like it's gonna run off of your page to an extent.
perfect. Thank you, Ms. Sanders. We'll add it to the feedback for sure.
Hello, Rachel Hobbs again. Mr. Gearbaugh, I'm going to demand that you retract your statement that I made a flat-out lie, and I'm going to demand your apology. I had my family go back and listen to the recording. My statement was, Mr. Sisso advised me that I should email Mr. Gearbaugh and those requests and reports. Mr. Gearbaugh and I had a sidebar conversation afterwards, which happened right here. And he said he would provide those to me, and he didn't. I never once said that you did not respond to my emails. That is very selfish and ignorant of you to make such statements rather than listening to the statements and being quick to respond. I will also renew my request with the district because as I was walking away, I saw these young students here applauding and nodding that the college information night should be repeated at least once or twice more. It is very important to these kids to have the college readiness. A slideshow is not acceptable. The feedback that you can get from live in-person discussion is so much valuable than sitting behind a computer and watching a slideshow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hobbs.
Steve Free. I have a question. I've come to these board meetings and I see the board approve teacher hires. And tonight, as I'm up there listening, it appears you guys were approving a teacher hire, or several, for teachers that are working part-time that have been doing that last year, at least one. I won't get everything correct. But I also thought I heard Brian say everything was in compliance. And I haven't read the teacher contract through and through. I have read it. I don't see where it says part-time teachers can be hired bypassing the board process of approving the hire. So it was my understanding, like Nancy Teetons and some others have been hired and we're working, but we're working without being approved by the board. And now they're being approved by the board. How was that legit or legal to bypass the process before, when Brian, I think you said it was all good and there were no issues, it was just cleaning things up? So again, the question I got, if we can get answered, that'd be great. Thank you.
There is a clause in the contract that allows under a certain number of hours to be paid using the adult ed teacher rate without bringing them into the MEA, and that's what we did last year.
I'm sorry to come up here, if I may. Also, I raised this with Mr. Shin. As far as the college information night, I do believe that there was a grant that was received by the guidance office, and it was announced in one of the spring meetings for like $25,000. I made a suggestion to Mr. Shin that some of that money could be used for employee hours outside of school hours. And if, if that's not what that use is for on that grant, I would like to know for somebody to respond by email how those funds are being used that was received by the guidance office. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hobbs. And thank you, Mr. Freight. Are there others? All right, thank you for those comments. Next up is we have student board representative comments. Ms. Molina was invited. She's unable to attend, so I'm going to be speaking with her in regards to what some of the issues are in regards to that. We have received applications for the other student members, so that'll be helpful in my conversation with her as we move forward with that. Superintendent comments. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yeah, several things to share this evening. First, the district wants to remind our students and families that applications for free and reduced meals are available on the Food and Nutrition Service tab of milenaryschools.org. Tonight, I also want to note, if you applied for free and reduced lunch prior to July 1st of 2022, that application is no longer applicable, and as of today, your student was automatically dropped by the state of Michigan. Our food service department has been working hard to follow up with all of those families, and my understanding is the majority of them have completed a new application for this year. But if you are in that situation and are notified that your child is no longer receiving free and reduced lunch, all we need you to do is complete a new application for approval, and then we can continue to provide that service for you. And again, that's a federal and state law that people are automatically dropped after 1 year of application. October is National Bullying Prevention Month. All 4 buildings are placing additional emphasis on their bullying prevention work throughout the month and throughout the year. Some of the programs that are being implemented in the buildings, and these programs are not in every building, different buildings do different things based on the age of their students, but we have buildings where individual and group support to students is being offered for those students who are experiencing conflict. We have individual and group support for students who have experienced bullying, as well as the students who have demonstrated bullying behavior. We have social emotional learning curriculum being put in place called Trails at several of our buildings. Teachers are doing activities and using discussion prompts to promote kindness and inclusion and help students recognize and respond to bullying throughout the month. Posters and signage around the schools to promote kindness and anti-bullying have been placed in all of the buildings. Classroom and building newsletters for parents are including articles about anti-bullying initiatives. There are school-wide kindness campaigns. A couple of the buildings are observing the Unity Day on October 19th. A couple of the buildings are having anti-bullying assemblies with outside professionals coming in to provide those assemblies. We have student councils involved in anti-bullying campaigns, and we have upstander clubs being formed at a couple of buildings. So a lot going on. Some of them have been going on previously, and some of them are being increased not only during the month of October, but throughout the school year based on the end-of-year survey that we received last year. I do want to thank the FFA for an outstanding hog roast on September 30th before the football game. It was a huge success, and we want to thank all of those that purchased a meal and helped support the FFA. I also want to take a minute to personally thank the school administrators. I appreciate the board doing so tonight, but without a team behind me, I really can't accomplish my job, and I'm so blessed to have a wonderful group of administrators throughout the district. And remember, administrators aren't just the building principals. You've got the assistant principals, you've got department heads. We have a large administrative team that helps make every aspect of the district run smoothly. And again, I cannot stress the appreciation that I have for each of them as individuals and the dedication that they have to this district to make us a successful educational entity. So again, a personal thanks. I will tell you that part of my gift to them is that we honor them, but we don't ask them to be present. They spend enough evenings in the schools. So we give them tonight off to stay at home, and I will make sure to pass on the resolution that you passed tonight. On Tuesday, October 11th, last night, actually in this theater, Officer Waz and I provided ALICE safety training to new staff members from all of the different employee groups. We had about 40 people here. Some of them weren't new this year, but hadn't received the training, weren't available last May when we did it. The training included a presentation on ALICE and then several tabletop scenarios that allowed the participants to apply the knowledge that they learned. Following the presentation, I had several staff come up and thank me and thank the officer for just the insight that it gives them into how to handle a situation if one ever occurs. The Milan Area Schools Board of Education Meet the Candidate Forum was hosted on Thursday, September 29th. There is a recording of that forum available on the school board's YouTube channel. There's also information and a link to the YouTube channel, as well as the questions that were asked in the current topics section of milanareaschools.org. So again, if anybody wants information about the candidates running for school board in November, please feel free to go and review the video. The district wants to remind our students and families that October 31st, which is coming up, December 9th, February 3rd, and May 5th have been changed from half days of school to non-student days. This calendar change was made to allow for additional professional development for the district's staff. Next is a little bit lengthy one. I did send this out in a communication to the entire district, but I will also review it tonight. Milan Area Schools believes in the importance of a strong relationship between the schools and the families of our students. We also know the significant impact that parent involvement can have on the success of our learners. With these understandings, the district is implementing an additional avenue of parent involvement. Milan Area Schools Media Centers provide a wide variety of resources to support and supplement each school's curriculum and fulfill the intellectual, educational, cultural, and recreational needs of students. Items in the Milan Area Schools Media Center collections represent many experiences and point of views. Materials provided offer new opportunities for children and teens to expand their minds and experiences and develop skills necessary for the future. As a public institution, Milan Area Schools Media Centers cannot discriminate against or based on origin, age, background, or views. Milan Area Schools Media Centers have a responsibility to provide information for a wide variety of users, and children and teens have the right to find the information that they choose. To keep parents informed of their students' use of the media centers, Milan Area Schools has developed a means of communication that will allow parents of middle school and high school students to be notified of the materials that their students have checked out of the material centers. If parents are interested in doing so at the middle school or high school, if they go to the current topics section of milanaryaschools.org, they will find a Google form that they can fill out requesting that they receive emails twice a week letting them know what their student has checked out of the library. That form will close at 4 p.m. on Friday, the 21st of October, and we hope to begin those notifications on November 1st. The Sexual Health Advisory Committee, SHAC, that includes parent and community stakeholders, met on Thursday, October 6th. The group will now be called the Sex Education Advisory Board, or SEAB. A lot of districts in the area are switching to this name, and actually our board policy references the group in that way, so we felt it was appropriate to change the name to the Sex Education Advisory Board. The board also requested that the district investigate the idea of providing follow-up lessons based off of the current health classes offered in the district. The curriculum in these would be the same as the curriculum used for the current classes, but will provide follow-up lessons in grades older than the original class. One of the suggestions was a lot of our high school students take health their freshman year, and they felt that it was important to give them a refresher on some of the health topics possibly during their senior year before they're headed off to college. It would be a very short, abbreviated, probably 1 or 2 day, not any longer than a week. We would figure out a way to work that into other classes, but this is a suggestion that they want us to investigate at this time. It is important to remember that the addition of any new curriculum that includes sexual health in materials requires a multiple-step process for approval, including open public hearings and board approval. This current suggestion that I spoke of really does not add any materials, it just expands them to grades, and it's important to know this, older than those materials are currently used for. Last, I want to thank Krista Hendricks and the entire central office team for an outstanding audit, the cleanest report we can get, and no findings of any kind. That's not easy to accomplish on a near $30 million budget. The hours and dedication that it takes is greatly appreciated by myself and I'm sure by the board. So thank you, Krista, for all of your hard work and dedication. Thank you.
Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple updates. Grant updates. I know you guys have been longing for those for a while. So in addition to the normal grants that are typically due in the summertime that during COVID got expanded, now they're shifted back towards summer. There's a couple other grants that have been around for 3 or 4 years, additional instructional time grant and the assessment reimbursement grant. So one of those has been released. We're in the middle of the application right now. One will be released soon. And then also the robotics grant, FIRST Robotics, that's also been released. So we're in the middle of that. 2 of those are due at the end of this month. The assessment reimbursement grant should be due at the end of November. So we'll have those completed. I'll provide updates. But I do also want to share that there's a number of new grants that the state has recently released, and we're just learning about a lot of these. One of them is called 98C, Section 98C. It's addressing learning loss. The memo came out on September 1st, and like just this week, we got some more information on what it is and what it contains, the application. So Brian and Kristen and I are working through that a little bit to kind of figure it out. There's a requirement by October 30th that I think we have to present to you. So we'll do that. We'll meet that deadline. And then the application is supposed to be due November 15th. And this one could potentially be upwards of 6 figures. So this is a significant grant that we're going to have to apply to one of our areas. But we're working through that, and we'll give you updates as we go there. I also want to share that 3 weeks ago now, I unfortunately missed the last meeting. 3 weeks ago, I was at the Special Populations Conference provided by MDE. That's been an annual conference for a while now. It's to guide districts' planning and intervention for special populations, like at-risk, homeless, ELL, special ed, at-risk groups. And so this year, the reason I'm mentioning it is because I was able to bring 2 additional folks with me, and that was Jen Saylor, who's now our English language learner interventionist, and Sarah O'Neill, who's our social worker in charge of at-risk populations, focusing on our homeless and foster care students. And I just want to mention that because they're both funded out of the 11T equalization grant that we approved last year, and it's a significant impact on our students already. And having them in attendance was very beneficial because normally it'd be me trying to attend as many of the sessions I can, a lot of which are simultaneous, and you just pick and choose what you can get. Now, they were able to go and focus on their area specifically, and I've been meeting with each of them regularly so far this year, and they're already starting to make great strides in bringing those students additional services. So I'm just really happy that that happened, and I just want to share that with you. So that's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Board member comments. I have a few things that I want to talk about. I did receive a request from Ms. Jepson and Ms. Unger in regards to a new requirement for the GMACF grants. They need a letter from the board president in support of the grants that they're asking for, so I am providing that. If you guys have any questions about that, you can ask me. I do want to remind the board that we do have a spot in the homecoming parade this Friday. Lineup is at 4:30, step off is at 5:15. So please, if you're able, let me know. We will be meeting at the Methodist Church for that lineup. And obviously we do invite the entire community to the homecoming activities. It's always a great community event. The staff do great at putting it on, and we look forward to seeing all the celebrations that the students have had in regards to that. And it's cool to see how the Spirit Weeks have lined up somewhat between all the schools. I know that's helpful for parents that have multiple kids in multiple schools. Next up is the Michigan School Board Conference is going to be next weekend. So several of the board members are going to be attending that conference. It's a great conference where we get a lot of education in regards to upcoming items that we'll be faced with, budgets and best practices and things such as that. So some of us will be attending that conference next week, and we'll bring back our findings from that. I also want to echo our thanks to the administrators. They do great work, and we do appreciate that. And I echo the work of Krista and the central office staff for the audit. It is quite remarkable to have this clean audit, especially with somebody new in the auditing position that's auditing us. So that's refreshing. I've been able to attend a couple events. I went to watch a flag football game that's been put on by Coach Hoskins' staff and the high school players. It's well organized. It's great to see the young players out there with mentors of the older players. So that's a great program. And then the board was also invited to a girls swim meet back on October 4th against Dundee, which of course they won. Ms. Ika can talk about that. But it was a great idea, and I don't know that I've seen it done here with other organizations, but they had a teacher recognition where each of the coach recognition where each of the seniors chose a coach or a teacher educator that was important in their life, and they talked about what they meant to each other, and it was a special event. So Coach Lajeunesse, Ms. Gill, Ms. Jepson, Ms. Kashida, I think she's part of the ECA program. Mr. Davis and Ms. Upton were all recognized as part of that, and I appreciate the invitation from the girls swim team to be a part of that. So those are the comments that I have. Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Rosenleach.
I'd just like to mention, I had the opportunity to be on a meeting with the internal DEI group, that's teacher-led, and they are really doing some amazing work to try and grow our DEI lens here in Milan Area School. So I really appreciated the opportunity to partake in that meeting.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Sislo.
Mr. Farrow.
I too attended the DEI meeting on October 6th. The attendees included Katie Earhart, Annie Kaiser, Liz Miller, Clara Theory, Wendy Unger, Mr. Gearbaugh, Jan Kiger, and Betty. And I just wanted to thank that group for including me. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that I do want to also thank Krista and the team at the district office. I know that I drive you crazy with my phone calls, but this was a very clean audit. and very well done. And I really appreciate your responsiveness in terms of getting back to my many inquiries. So thank you very much.
Mr. Sislo.
Yes, Ms. Freight.
I'll start due to the time frame that if you haven't already had dinner, tonight is a Dine to Donate at Peppers. It's sponsored by the Simons PTO, so if you want to go out and grab some dinner, Peppers would be great because they're donating part of their proceeds to our Simons PTO. Their next meeting is October 19th. It's from 7 to 8. That's the Simons PTO. I also want to do a shout out to our equestrian team that had regional representation again. Also kudos to our girls swim team, our boys tennis, our soccers, and our girls, our robotics team in general, but in the fall, they do a girls only competition. And our robotics team, just the girls portion, because that's the meaning of the competition, represented very well. So it was kind of nice to have that be out there. Just very excited for our homecoming week, Spirit Day. It was College Day, so I'm specifically wearing that for them because I thought that was a really cool, easy day to do. Excited for the parade. Mr. Sislo, are we going to hand anything out? Don't you have pencils still, Mrs. Heike?
I don't know that we have.
I think we're all
I didn't
out
know.
of pencils.
I figured we could talk about that later, but I thought
Remember, I
about the
dropped them all on the floor, on the ground at the corner.
I thought about your
Flag.
endless supply of pencils, so I didn't know if that would go. And the game ought to be interesting.
I have lots of whoopee cushions that I thought we could hand out at the Halloween, but it might be just better just doing it at the
We'll find something.
I'm sure the parents will appreciate whoopee cushions.
So that ought to be exciting. I'm looking forward to be able to participate. And the game ought to be interesting because, of course, we're playing my Jets, so split. I'll see what colors we end up wearing on that one. I also want to put a note out just for everybody because I know it's difficult to find that parent-teacher conferences are coming up next week. At the middle school, as their representative, they're going to be Wednesday and Thursday. All of our schools are Wednesday and Thursday. There's a lunch break in there for our teachers. They're here for a very long time. There's a bunch of different sign-up seats, so if you feel so compelled to bring some food in for the teachers between 4:45 and 5:50, a bunch of different sign-up sheets. I'm sure the office would be great to take anything you want to leave for them. Not to continue with my questions, Mr. Sislo, but do we have an expectation of when we would know our student rep for
I would
June?
definitely by the next meeting, for
Okay,
sure.
all right.
Yes.
I was just curious.
Yep.
It was one of my questions.
Good question.
On here as well. More official-like, as your representative for the LRN from WISD and WSB, we had a meeting. It was a little bit too late to get on the agenda. Basically, with the potential new changes in Lansing, the WASB, Washtenaw Association of School Boards, working through WISD, Washtenaw Intermediate School District, I think I got it all,
RESPECT.
is trying to be a little bit more proactive in such that we want to be able to ask all the boards, 9 districts in our intermediate school district, what do we see as our needs? What do we see as our concerns? And to address them more proactively. In the past, as many of you have been representatives before, you go to the legislative coffees, you sit, they tell you what's going on, you react. The hope is with potential changes and the fact that we are, as the superintendent mentioned, we have some very strong, we're fortunate to have some very strong representatives to maybe go to them with our concerns prior to and say, this is what we would like you to work on in an effort to try to get them to do more of what we would like them to do, and be a little more proactive, if you will, than coming back and seeing what they're doing. One of the thoughts that was brought up as an example was the fact that all of our districts, all 9 of them, are suffering some sort of shortage when it comes to staff. If it's teachers, if it's paras, if it's bus drivers. What is Naomi's last name?
Norman.
Thank you. Naomi Norman is the Washtenaw Intermediate School District Superintendent, and she mentioned, Mr. Gearbaugh, that you guys now have, the superintendents have a very strong group, and that what she would like to see is our legislative group, so our LRN representatives, come back to the board, ask all of us a general consensus of what we feel is something that we could bring and be, again, more proactive to come back and form a district-wide, if you will, of all 9 districts. So not just come in and complain, someone's poaching this teacher or that, but to come at it and say, well, what can we do? Our new, on the exec board, secretary and treasurer is from Ypsilanti, and one of the things Ypsilanti is looking at is housing incentives for all of their staff now, looking at, right? So just an idea of kind of one of those things where if you come and live in our area, we do some sort of understanding of housing, because again, if you're a brand new teacher making 40,000, where are you going to live, especially in the situation that the economy is right now? But working that as an entire district, right? All of our districts, all 9 of our districts coming at it and saying, hello, legislators, you know, could you think a little bit more proactive about what we can do to help? And these are the problems we would like you to focus on. So in the near future, if there's anything that is on anybody's mind or we want to have a discussion, whatever, I just want that to be on your brain, to be able to say, hey, bring that to their attention, because they're really just trying to be a little more active, participate more, get a little more out of it other than going to the breakfast and listening what they have to say, kind of have some more input in. And I think even MASB has asked us for years to, you know, here's how do you write your representatives. And I think several of our board members, I know, in fact, have done that. This is just yet another effort to kind of back that up, and then know that we have all 9 of our districts, or hopefully the thought is, kind of backing us up, and more the merrier, the bigger the band, the squeaky wheel, that type of thing. So again, if you have any recommendations or concerns or anything, if you want to get it to Andrew or me, and we can get it at the next meetings. We're still working on some dates for the next legislative coffees. Unfortunately, due to some staffing issues and some situations, we weren't able to get one in, and we typically have one in the fall, and then we are hoping to have, we definitely will have a meeting in March, but we'll have one. And those of you that attend in person, we'll go back to having food, so it will indeed be a breakfast to entice anyone. Nothing very posh by all means, because there's not that much money, but maybe some bagels. So again, if you guys have anything that pops up, in your mind that you're like, you know what, this is something that we should definitely kind of get behind the 8 ball. And I will be bringing back to the board the ideas from the other districts, so that if it wasn't something we were thinking of, that, but we do have an area where we do feel like we could support or not support, like we've done in the past when we vote on those issues that are brought forward. So sorry for the long-windedness, but that is the hope of then moving forward with that board.
Cool.
Thank you, Mr. Sissel.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Wright. Others?
Mr. Sislo,
Yeah, it's Ms.
along
Akin.
those lines, Ms. Freight, I personally, and I don't know how we come to a consensus on this board, but I would like our legislators to seriously address the issue of school safety, because after the tragedy in Oxford, they convened a committee, and the committee came out with a report that was very disappointing and basically said, we just need to train our teachers more. And then there was no further action by the legislature. They've just kind of they've done nothing. And in fact, I think I saw a report the other day that there've been 2 voting days in the legislature since this summer. Wow. And so from my perspective, one of the things I think that collectively our districts could be pushing for is for the legislature to take seriously this issue of school safety and help us. Not just tell us to train our teachers more. So I don't know how we reach consensus on that, but since you asked.
Yeah.
If I may, Mrs. Height?
No, I think we can put it on the agenda.
Okay,
But
perfect.
I mean, ideas can come up now for sure, but I think we'll make it an agenda item for the next meeting to have discussion around items to bring forward to the legislature. So that makes a lot of sense.
Perfect.
Yep.
I also want to congratulate the tennis team. They had an outstanding season and had a state qualifier also this year again. I want to wish the football team luck this weekend at the homecoming game, and I hope that all the staff and the students are having a great time with the Spirit Weeks. I do really love to see the little kids get super involved in it, and I did get pictures of staff members in their pajamas, including my husband, which was really kind of funny. I want to congratulate the volleyball team. They're having an incredible season as well. The girls' swim team did beat Dundee the other day. They also kicked off their Huron League meet schedule this past Tuesday and handedly beat Riverview. So they've started on their progress to, I think it'll be their 23rd year of undefeated meets within the Huron League. So I don't want to jinx them, but they're off to a great start already. I really want to thank our communications committee for all the time and the effort and the thoughtfulness that they put into these recommendations. I wasn't at the meetings. We just got the report back from Mr. Sislo and Ms. Freight and previously Ms. Landingham and now Ms. Rosenleacher. But it was very clear that all of you took this role very seriously, and I really appreciate all the time and effort, because I know, I know most of you, and I know, like me, your schedules didn't have time for those multiple hour meetings, but I appreciate all of you and all the work that you did. Mr. Gerba, I want to thank you for implementing the parental choice options for our middle school and high school libraries. I look forward to see how that works and how many parents take advantage of that. And Krista, I want to thank you for a great audit. I know I've been so hard on you in past years, so I just want you to know that I do appreciate you, and I'm very proud of you for the hard work that you've clearly put in to get this audit. So thank you very much for all your work. And your staff too, not just you, but others, everyone.
I'd like to thank the DEI team for their invitation. It was an informational meeting. I would also like to thank the swim team for their invitation. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make that. I also want to thank Krista because I know what my budget's like, so, and I don't have auditors breathing down my neck, so thank you. I want to thank our administrators, and just as a matter of housekeeping, Mr. Sislo, is the board planning to pass out items at the downtown trick-or-treat?
We certainly can, if there is if there's an interest in that, for sure. It was a fun time.
Even in the rain?
The glasses, the light-up glasses that we had were very fun. So I'll put that out as an option, and then I know you have a bunch of stuff left over from that.
I bought new, let me tell you. So
Okay.
I have taken care of that part of it.
Well, it's not candy either. I mean, this is, when the kids come to the table, they're like, oh, wow. I mean, like, they're passing out toys. So I think it's a great event. So that would be the Friday before Halloween. Yep. For downtown trick-or-treating. I don't think I'm in town. I'm pretty sure I'm not in town. But we'll firm that up. So are you interested, Ms. Geiger?
Yes, I
Okay,
am.
sounds good. Then we'll get some other help and we'll go from there.
I can help channel.
All right. Perfect. Well, we at least have two, so we will get in contact and we'll get a table for downtown trick-or-treating. I'm sure we'll probably be in Toland Square. I think that's where we were last year, so. Others? Last but not least, Ms. Macchio.
I don't like going last because there's so many things that have been said and I just feel like I'm repeating. But anyway, yeah, I did want to reiterate the thanks to Krista and her staff, the central office staff, because I can't imagine working with a $30 million budget and being that on track and having such a clean audit. So we deeply appreciate that. And I wrote pretty much the same thing down about the communications committee. I know we talk about it at every meeting, but it's been such it's really just come full circle from where we started. But the document was such a professional, well thought out, just list of fantastic ideas. So I just want to say thank you because that was a tremendous amount of work and time. And it was very obvious that so much thought went into that entire thing. I did get the chance to go to Paddock's Fall Festival last week, which was great. I brought my husband with me too, and it was great. I mean, it's just another wonderful example of our PTO and our staff and our families and our community coming out to have all kinds of different activities for the kids and photo opportunities. Thanks to Zilke's, making the wagon, with the beautiful flowers and stuff, so families get out there and, have a beautiful family picture, to the petting farm, which I enjoyed just as much as the kids. But it was just a great event, and they had beautiful weather, which was awesome too. So, it was just great to get out and see just kids having fun, and families together really enjoying it. And that's it for me.
Several of you have spoken on the document and how it was written. I want to give extreme thanks to Karen Lambert. She was the chairperson of the committee, and she is the person that collated all of our ideas and did the research and the background information behind it. So obviously, everybody on the committee participated and provided their ideas, but it was really Karen Lambert, the co-chair of that committee, who collated this and provided the appendix and put it together in this way. So a lot of thanks to her. So, all right, any other questions or concerns? All right, the meeting's adjourned at 8:45.